And Bryce Zabel wrote the book literally on what happens the day the government finally tells the truth. He wrote it 16 years ago. Buckle up and let's just get into it. Bryce, let me start with you. This is something that you were concerned about, 15, 16 years ago. What context, what impact does this have when it all comes out?
Well, I think it'll have an enormous impact on almost all aspects of our lives. I actually think that what you're doing is very important, thinking about how it's going to impact people. And I guess it depends on a couple of things, Dr. Phil. First of all, what is it that's going to actually be disclosed? And the second is, at what time frame is it disclosed? For example, I live out here in Hollywood where we talk about slow dissolves or hard cuts. A slow dissolve is what you might say we're in right now, where we're getting that drip of these tranches that come out, and more people are talking about it. But nobody has actually stepped to a podium like the president or the Pope or the premier of China and said, these things are real. That would be a hard cut. Then we would be saying to ourselves, okay, now we have to deal with this reality all at once. So yeah, I think everything, every part of life, everything will be impacted. Whether it'll be changed for the better or the worse, I think will depend a lot on what you're thinking about right now, which is how are we going to handle it?
Look, we've all operated under the kind of human exceptionalism sort of idea that human beings held dominion over the earth. We were the top of the food chain, so to speak. And if in fact we're not alone in this universe, and if someone, some other being, intelligent life form, has visited the United States, I think by default they would be technologically superior to us in that it would take 2.5 million years to come from the nearest galaxy at the speed of light. What are we most likely, in your opinions, dealing with here?
I think that's the big question. And the one thing I think we all need to take a step back and say about these tranches that are coming out is at least the documents and the videos, rather, that Chris was instrumental in getting out. We sort of have context around them right now because we know that the major one was the Nimitz case. We know where it was and when it was. A lot of these videos that like the one you just showed, the government is letting them out, but without the data that goes behind them. And so we aren't quite clear on what the lessons are to learn about all those videos. But to answer your question specifically, everybody has a different opinion right now. There are people out there, Dr. Phil, who are still saying, oh, no, it's got to be our technology. Now, I look at what I saw from those 3 videos that came out in 2017. I don't think they're our technology. And even if they were our technology, we've been seeing things like this, Dr. Phil, as you said yourself recently, for 79 years. Well, back 79 years ago, nobody had that technology. I don't think the Chinese had an air force 79 years ago. So I just don't think that it is earthly technology we're talking about. That doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. There are a lot of other explanations people are talking about, but that, I think, defines the question of our times and why we're here right now. It's like, let's get the facts out there on the table. Let's get the scientists and the various people who can help us analyze them to work, and let's encourage our government that has been studying this for nearly 8 decades and maybe more to share their work with the rest of us.
Well, that's what I mean when I talk about context, because as you say, the government puts out now in these 4 different batches of information, and the 4th one they released to me and my team exclusively ahead of time, which gave us an opportunity to really do a deep dive and get into it and see what was there. And we were looking for context. And really what we've had to do is provide our own context with our own independent experts.
Doctor, just one follow-up to what you just said, though. If people want to understand what you were just saying in really stark terms, come out to where I live in LA, go to Disneyland, go on one of those rides where they drop you and you're just, or a roller coaster where you're feeling that kind of pressure, and now multiply by 1,000 or 10,000 for some of these things. These are simply impossible with physics as we understand them. That's the only point I would make. So at that point, we have to start looking for other explanations. That's part of the scientific method. Well, Dr. Phil, one of the things that I think we're all happy that the government is at least trying to put some stuff out. Some of it's already been out through the Freedom of Information Act. I see you got the Robertson panel document up there. That actually was something that happened in 1953. We found out about it in 2001, thanks to the Freedom of Information Act. But finally, more people are actually looking at it, thanks to these tranches being put out. But one thing I want to do, I heard you interviewed the other day, and you said it just now, for 79 years, this kind of thing has been going on. So one of the things that these tranches has helped us do is to put in perspective exactly the point you're making. In 1949, the private document that the government put out or that wrote for itself, not to be shared with the people, said it must be accepted that some type of flying objects have been observed. It is firmly indicated there is no domestic explanation. The objects are a threat and warrant more active efforts at identification and interception. That's what they were telling themselves. But Dr. Phil, in the same year, in 1949, the same year, this is what they said in public. All evidence and analysis indicate that reports of UFOs are the result of misinterpretation, a mild form of mass hysteria, individuals who fabricate such reports, and psychopathological persons. Okay? So your point is so well taken. There's been a two-track thing that the government's been on for years where they're saying one thing to themselves, which is, we better take this thing seriously. And to us, they're saying, yeah, you know what? If you're thinking of reporting something, don't, because you'll look foolish if you do. And I think those days are coming to an end. I mean, this is a good example, this show.
I think people can take some comfort in knowing that if they were going to melt us with a ray gun or something of that nature, they've had ample opportunity to do that. They may have been here 1,000 years before we were here. Who knows what the situation is? But we do know that as long as we've been monitoring this and tracking it, there have been no overt hostile acts. And I think people can take some comfort in that, and should.
They should. The only thing I would say is, if we're dealing with a non-human intelligence, or an NHI, as we like to say now, we'd have to assume that they think differently than us. So even in our own world, in the United States, we tend to think in 4-year terms because of presidential terms, right? So you can't get something off the ground if it can't get done right away. The Chinese may think in 100-year terms when they think about Taiwan or whatever. It's possible there are alien or non-human intelligences that think in a different time frame. If their time frame was 1,000 years, then they could just be getting started. And on the topic of the nuclear issue, which I share concern of, I mean, I think the nuclear issue means it is at least a national security issue of some kind. Now, I've heard people talk about this, Dr. Phil, two different ways. Some people say, well, they're looking at our nuclear capabilities because they want to protect us from ourselves. Okay, that's great. I hope that's true. But the other would be, what do you do before you actually go to war with anybody? Is you do reconnaissance. You try to find out what the other guy has. What are their assets? What are their capabilities? So I think the problem that we need to overcome in this country is getting to a place where we understand this phenomenon that we're encountering enough that we can at least start to figure out intent. What is the intent? There have been people that have reported being abducted over the years. What's the intent behind that? Is it medical? Is it more nefarious? What is it? And so we got a lot of work to do. And I think that's why I am so supportive of your current efforts, because you're basically saying, let's get started, people. Let's really take this seriously. Let's quit fooling around and stigmatizing people that want to take it seriously, and let's get to work. But let's get to work as a human race. Let's start sharing what we know, and let's make progress. That's where I'm coming from too.
The con artists and the scammers are going to find every opportunity to prey upon those that are concerned and worried about this. And I think we need to be prepared to take care of those that might be destabilized by this information that's coming out right now. We can't pretend they aren't there. We've made those mistakes in the past, like during COVID, for example. There are those that are more impacted than others, and we need to be prepared to handle that.
A vulnerable group, Dr. Phil, is literally our children. The children of the world are going to have questions, and you, of all people, absolutely know how we handle those questions with our children in the years to come is going to be very important. We need to figure out how to be honest with them, but at the same time, assure them that we're doing everything we can to keep them safe and secure and that they're going to be all right. It's such a complex subject. We can barely tell ourselves what's going on. So to try to tell kids is something else. The one thing I just wanted to put out there, people constantly do polls where they ask people, do you believe in UFOs? And that's the wrong question, because people tend to answer that one like they're being asked, do you believe in aliens? My answer is, we all believe in UFOs. We've already agreed that UFOs exist. They're unidentified, they fly, and they're objects. So the question isn't belief anymore. The question is trying to understand this phenomenon that has presented itself on our doorstep, at least for 80 years, and maybe, as you pointed out earlier, for thousands. If you want to understand the future, try to understand the past really comes in, because obviously certain things have happened in the past. When we got bad news before we closed the banks, we shut down the stock market during the 9/11 attacks. We'll be doing some of those things. The one thing, Chris, that's interesting about the 15%, though, and we talked about this, my co-author Richard Dolan and I, when we wrote this After Disclosure book, which is, okay, if 15% take it badly, 15% of the say the gasoline truck drivers are included. What if those 15% don't go to work the next day because they're freaking out? Well, then you have that thing where suddenly there's gas lines, and suddenly the media is covering that. And suddenly you feel like a sense of panic. And now everybody's at Costco buying toilet paper. And, we know the psychological ramifications of some of this. So again, it goes back to what's disclosed. If you were to tell me or someone else, well, listen, I'm disclosing that Roswell is real, but don't worry. All these things you're seeing flying around now are the technology we were reverse engineered and everything's fine. That would be one thing. But if you disclose, well, it turns out there's 5 different species here right now, and they all have different agendas. Well, that's a whole different form of disclosure. So again, I just don't know what the facts are. And I really do think that we have some encouraging news in the current government that they seem to be willing to let us start having this discussion. I think it's all positive.
The thing that bothers me is that the government has decided that they're going to substitute their judgment for our own. That to me just smells of a psyop by this government to misdirect. I don't think it's right, and I don't think it's necessary.
If you look at the history of all this, you can sort of give everybody a pass for what happened in 47. I happen to think the Roswell case is an authentic case, and there seems to be more evidence for that every day. And if that was the case in 1947, just imagine what the world was like. We had just won World War II at enormous cost. It was the worst catastrophe in the world's history. And so the idea that we would have to get on top of this issue first would seem to be a reasonable thing. And for Truman to turn the military loose on it, that also seems like a reasonable thing. But then as time goes on, you begin to say, okay, are we just going to keep this secret forever? And I think that's what we're all pushing back on. And so I wonder if there's a need for a different word here. We talk about disclosure. When people hear disclosure, they think, okay, well, somebody's going to come out and say, here's a terabyte of video and audio and photos and documents. Go knock yourselves out. I don't think that's ever going to happen, Dr. Phil, but I think what could happen and should happen quickly is what I call confirmation. What I'm most interested in for our leadership to do is to confirm the basic fact we're not alone, and that there's evidence of visitation of a non-human intelligence. And then they can parse it any way you want. And you delineated a good way to look at it, which is obviously some things are going to remain classified in our nation's best interests. But on the overall, whether we're alone or not, we're not going to hide that anymore. And in fact, we're going to try to bring in the scientists of our nation and the rest of the world and the leadership of the world and try to work on this. And we'll get back to you. I'd be happy with that, to be quite honest. That would take me a long way towards satisfaction. I tried to explain it at a dinner party, what people were seeing, this giant sphere with a cube inside it flying around. This is hard to get your head around. And so that's why I'm on your side about let's get this better video out there. We know there is HD quality. We know there's 4K to 8K out there, gun camera stuff. Why are we still looking at these images? Can't we have a few of the great images where it removes doubt and then we can get on with saying, okay, now we're on the same page. This is real. You can see it with your own eyes. Because these are incredible things that people are reporting and always have been. It is true. We see evidence of the insider tug of war. And it is true also that the government seemed to be completely in control of this issue for a while. But there is a lot of evidence because of what Dr. Phil was just saying about the idea of the temp employee being the president and some of our elected officials. For that very reason, especially when the Freedom of Information Act came out, there's evidence that there were some kind of cutouts from the government to private aerospace and private enterprise. And so a lot of the actual answers may not lie in the government like they used to. When they do, they're obviously compartmentalized as well. Then there's also within our own government, you notice that there's a lot of Navy videos coming out. You're not seeing a lot of Air Force videos. There's been a historic difference between how the two of them have dealt with it. The Air Force, and Chris, by the way, you wrote a great article about this that delineated how the Air Force, when we were asked to come up with stuff for this 2021 report, when the services were, the Navy came up with most of the videos, and the Air Force, I don't think, came up with any of them. And that actually, Dr. Phil, fits with an experience that I had back in the 90s. I had a TV series about an alien invasion, and we were approached by people who said they were from the Office of Naval Intelligence, and they thought that we'd got a lot right in our series. And one of the things that we had in our series is the cover-up was run by the Navy, not by the Air Force. And they were saying that got our attention. So I do think you have a couple of things. You have Air Force versus Navy, but then you also have government versus private enterprise. And I guess the reality of this is, while the phenomenon is mysterious and difficult to understand, so is our response to it. And I think if anything, we are going to spend the next few years picking apart how we've responded to it and trying to find out what it is we're even responding to.
Bryce, I'll ask you the same question. Any doubt in your mind as to whether or not we are alone?
I have to just echo what Chris said. And so let me build one thought, a final concluding thought on top of that. I don't think whoever's here, this NHI, is here because we're average or insignificant. As some people like to say, well, why would they care about us? Well, they're here. Okay. I think they're here because we are interesting. I think that our planet, it has billions and billions of species out there, and life is abundant on Earth. We are very interesting, number one. Number two, this is just a hypothesis, but it applies to humans. I think all intelligent life must be interesting to all other intelligent life. And because we're interested in other intelligences that are out there, I'm sure that others are interested about us. I think that's the explanation for why they're here, because diversity of biology and life forms is fascinating. And I think we should look forward to this contact becoming more formal and open in the future. And I hope it does. And let me just conclude, Dr. Phil, and say thank you. Thank you for the commitment that you're making to bringing this subject forward, because Someday they're going to have to rewrite all the history books. And this is going to be a huge moment in the world's history. And it's kind of humbling for all of us to be a part of it, but let it begin now.